people, and it is time to invoke the power of attorney. Yes, I am joined on Peikoff Wednesday by all of you good people and former prosecutor James Valliant. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastically well. I really do have to say I'm doing marvelously. How about you,
Outstanding.
sir? How about you,
Well,
sir?
you have set us up for a good day here
Oh, good.
because we've had a great time talking about heroism, Ayn Rand's heroes, those characters. And today, jumping right off from that directly is productive work and how do we stack up, James? How do we stack up? How are we supposed to compare to the John Galts of the world? Well, of course, we're not going to answer that question without a context. Our context is questions asked of Leonard Peikoff in his volume, Keeping It Real, Bringing Ideas Down to Earth. And I hope everybody listening, and it's good to see we've already got folks in the chat, are going to find these answers both interesting, insightful, compelling, and maybe gratifying or inspiring in terms of your own personal interests and careers. So, James, I want to jump right in because this is going to be good. Leonard Peikoff was asked, question number one, how can one agree with objectivism, but never really feel he can be John Galt? And this is interesting because the questioner at this point just immediately slips from first person to second person. Probably a wise choice. No. I'm sure that's the way it really was. He says, my friend was depressed after.
For a friend.
Yeah, I'm sure it really was a friend. It's just funny to me because every time I read these questions, I try them on for size. I slip them on like a pair of clothes in a clothing store. Right. My friend was depressed after reading Atlas Shrugged because he felt like an Eddie Willers, not a John Galt. We've talked about the role of Eddie Willers in Atlas Shrugged, an important role. We've talked about the message of the fate of Eddie Willers. But this is interesting. My friend was depressed because he felt like an Eddie Willers, not a John Galt. I swear there are days when I wish I felt like an Eddie Willers where I'm falling short because, what a man of sterling character. His only limitations were his ability. So let me give part of Leonard Peikoff's answer, and then we need to talk about this. Leonard Peikoff answered, well, it's a big, big mistake even to raise such a question as, am I or am I not John Galt? From any hero, including John Galt, you are supposed to derive broad abstractions and then choose and achieve your own concretes. You're not supposed to imitate any specific entity, any specific hero, nor judge yourself by them. You should never define your goals or your success, or yourself, or another person's life or achievements. You cannot live your life as a competition. If you did, you would be lost. And then Dr. Peikoff goes on with a personal example here. He says, imagine that I, starting out with my with my modest Western Canadian skills, said, well, I've got to see whether I can ever be Aristotle or Ayn Rand. I would be totally paralyzed, totally phony. And I'd have to say I was completely defeated at the start because I could prove at age 12 that I could never be this kind of genius or achiever. My life had to be about having certain goals that I wanted to achieve. And there's no comparison. As long as my goals are objective, it's completely irrelevant whether somebody has produced more. And he goes on in the same vein, but yes, this idea that not only are you inspired by John Galt, not only does John Galt point the way to the right ideas, but he becomes something you have to live up to in the concretes, in the level of achievement.
You know, when I first read Atlas Shrugged, I have to admit something. I identified with Eddie Willers, and I identified with Eddie Willers in this sense more than I did with Galt. And that did not leave me depressed, however. It absolutely did not leave me depressed. The idea that I couldn't be an Aristotle, to use one of Leonard Peikoff's examples, or an Ayn Rand. I mean, here is John Galt. He is a physicist on the order of Newton. He's an inventor on the order of Edison, and he discovers objectivism to boot. Now, I knew it was unlikely that I would be an achiever on that scale. But let's take it down a notch, even from John Galt. Hank Rearden and Dagny Taggart in Atlas Shrugged, they give the world Rearden metal. Rearden invents this amazing new metal with amazing new properties, but no, because it's a new product, there's all this press saying it's dangerous and untested. Dagny Taggart, with the John Galt line, demonstrates the effectiveness of Rearden metal. She takes that brave move, she has the courage, she shows its capacities with the Rearden bridge and so forth, and all of that. And even on that scale, when I read the book as a teenager for the first time, I had no idea that I could ever give the world Rearden metal or build the John Galt line like Hank Rearden and Dagny Taggart did. The idea that I could do that in particular, I knew, no, I'm not going to be a metallurgist or a railroad engineer. So I could never prove the value of Rearden metal, much less invent it. So it wasn't an assault on my ego, or didn't make me unhappy or depressed. But what I was inspired by with Eddie Willers is in the opening chapters, his motto for life: do the right thing. And I realize this is a perfectly moral person, and not everyone has the capacity, the creative genius, to be an Aristotle or a John Galt or a Hank Rearden, or much less have the courage and insight that a Dagny Taggart has. Those people are achievers on a vast scale. Now, did I improve my opinion of myself in a way that Leonard Peikoff did in a way? Yeah. I started out thinking, well, I don't know if we'll see how far I can achieve. You know, there are a lot of objectivists who look at the Eddie Willers character and don't like him because they think the only difference is a matter of ambition, that if he had a little more gumption, that he could be a John Galt or a Dagny Taggart. Why doesn't he have the gumption to do that? Because, you know, we objectivists de-emphasize innate talent as a concept. But the truth of the matter is people not only have, I think, different capacities naturally in them, not that free will and thought isn't what's really in control here, and not that people can't really improve. I mean, it's how you exercise your brain muscle, I think, more importantly than what your native brain gift is. Let me put it that way. But I think there is both features working here. And a lot of it is also historical circumstance, biographical circumstance, whether or not you're going to be this monumental achiever or not. Ayn Rand is saying with Eddie Willers, on purpose, you can be a perfectly virtuous person and be short of being one of these great achievers. That is a matter of your context and your circumstances. And frankly, most of us are never going to be achievers on that scale. What I love about let me say another bit here. What I love about Ayn Rand is that she so admired human achievement. She so admired genius and greatness and great achievement that she's not going to let this democratic egalitarianism get in her way. No, she's interested, and I was interested. Even if I'm identifying more with Eddie Willers, I'm interested in the John Galts and the Hank Reardens and the Dagny Taggarts. That fascinates me. But look at the characters, all the range of the characters in Ayn Rand's books. I'll take you back to The Fountainhead. Howard Roark has friends from every potential capacity and occupation. He has a construction worker friend, Mike, who appreciates Roark and that Roark can share values with. The fact that he's a construction worker and Howard Roark's the most creative architect in the world does not prevent them from sharing values, being friends, recognizing one another's virtues. The running of the John Galt line, for the first time that I've mentioned in Atlas Shrugged, the ordinary people are more virtuous. The ordinary railroad workers Ayn Rand is presenting are more virtuous than these intellectuals have been complaining about Hank Rearden's greed and this dangerous new metal. So Ayn Rand is going out of her way to say that ordinary people can be perfectly virtuous, way more virtuous than these evil intellectuals who are often the bad guys. So these really super smart people may be the supervillains and the superheroes in Ayn Rand's novel, but Ayn Rand is going out of her way. Just consider Howard Roark's client list, especially when he's on the outs and early struggling. It's a variety of people who are just using their independent judgment, saying, you know, I may just be a mid-level businessman, but I want your architecture skills, Mr. Roark. And Ayn Rand did not think virtue was limited to super geniuses. She did not develop objectivism for Ragnar's and for Professor Axton's. She presented that she wanted ethics. In fact, she distinguished, she had a little phrase in her mind. Is it philosophy for Reardon or is it philosophy for Ragnar? Ragnar was a professional philosopher. You'd need to get into all the technical details, and he could explain it to you like Dr. Peikoff could, or Greg Salmieri could, at a really high philosophical level. But for those of us who don't devote ourselves to that profession, like any other specialist, we sort of rely on specialists. But for philosophy to be any operative use to me in my life, I've got to grasp it at a certain level. And so even if you're not a professional philosopher, philosophy should be the operative thing, and it should make sense to you. It should be the operative thing in your life, and you can be a perfectly virtuous, good person without, at the end of the day, being this mega achiever that are the folks that Galt rounds up for the Valley. Like, spoiler alert, sorry. I know that was a big, long explanation, but it just seems to me that Ayn Rand is intentionally there saying that I'm not just talking about these geniuses, these supermen out there doing these incredible, I'm talking about everybody. Virtue, philosophy, it applies to everybody. And you can be a perfectly virtuous and under the right circumstances, happy person. The problem with which he's showing with Eddie Willers is how dependent they are on the society around them. In a free society, Eddie Willers would never have had a problem. Given the state of affairs in Atlas Shrugged, his fate, Ayn Rand is dramatically showing the fate of the ordinary person when you don't have a free society that liberates virtue. And that, I think, is the correct literary decision. It may not be happy for us to see, again, spoiler alert, an unknown or less than happy ending for Eddie Willers, but isn't that the fate of the ordinary person when a society doesn't liberate the mind and doesn't permit that kind of virtue?
Just so.
This is a really important issue.
Yes.
Objectivism is meaningful, important, and vital to the ordinary person who can be a perfect objectivist without being a mega achiever like John Galt. It's that simple. Happiness does not require the guy getting depressed that he couldn't be a John Galt is what really gets to me. What a sad state of affairs. I knew I could never be a dancer like Baryshnikov. I knew I could never sing a Puccini aria. I knew that I could never create Aristotle's epistemology. These achievements were probably, and as a young person, they were just way above my possible ambition. Now, as I say, over the course of my life, my view of myself has improved. I think I'm a lot more of an achiever than I started out thinking. But that was because I set out on a course, like Leonard Peikoff did, of honest achievement. And so following back right on to Dr. Peikoff's answer there, he started out realizing, well, I can't be Ayn Rand. I can't be John Galt. I'm just going to be honest and do my job as best I can. And by the end of the day, Dr. Peikoff is one of the great world achievers of history. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you feel like Eddie Willers, do not diss yourself. There's nothing to be depressed about, and just do the best you can, and who knows what you'll contribute.
You may well be the executive assistant to the person running a railroad. It's a topic we could easily talk about for an hour. Apollo
Indeed.
Zeus in the chat says, well, in objectivism, like James alluded to, it de-emphasizes natural ability and emphasizes hard work and productivity. I get that, and that relates to what you said. I don't think it's fully accurate. I don't think we de-emphasize natural ability because, as you say, we see a range of that in Ayn Rand's characters. But what I do think it capitalizes on is the fact that most of us are capable of far more than we realize.
That is true.
And the vast majority of our limitations are self-imposed.
That is also true. That is also true. But I have to be honest with myself. I am not going to be a lead forward in the NBA.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
And the same thing is true for me and piano. On the other hand, when you realize, say, like me in late teenage years, I don't really have the talent of other musicians out there. I don't have a natural knack for it. I have no sense of rhythm. What I learned from growing up and from life and from inspirational films like, you know, the film Shine,
Yeah.
about the autistic pianist David Helfgott,
Right.
a man with all sorts of reasons why this guy was never going to be a successful concert pianist, but he had a certain knack, he had a certain talent, even though he had all these obstacles. But the main thing is that he was eventually persuaded to go for it. And he will never be the world's greatest pianist, but he's doing what he loves to, and he's doing it very, very well. You know, better than any amateur pianist ever could. He might not be ranking up there with the greats, but that's exactly the position a lot of us are in. We might not be John Galt, but if we could be Eddie Willers, if we could be that consistently good, we will achieve far more than we realize.
See, it takes virtue, an enormous virtue, to be John Galt. There's no doubt. But virtue is not the sole condition for great achievement. It simply is not. There are natural differences in people's physical capacities, and as far as I know, brain capacities. And those may not be as important as the exercise of that brain capacity, or as Dr. Edwin Locke says, the gumption factor versus the native IQ factor is way more important.
Well,
I have to agree with that.
That makes a great point too, is that it's more than those two. There are so many elements that are part of this, and that's why I want to give a huge shout out. Catherine in the chat is in with a super chat. Super chats have started rolling in. The money is coming in. You guys are the best, and this supports everything the Ayn Rand Center UK does. We'll talk more about that, but Catherine says, you have no idea how much I needed to hear this discussion today. Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate that. And I've got to say, in relation to that, and James, I want to hear more from you, but I've got to say this. When I read about Howard Roark, I don't measure myself by whether I measure up to that or fall short of Howard Roark. What I see with Howard Roark is I want to be more like that. Not I don't want to be that. Not I want to dye my hair orange. Not I want to be an architect. I want to be more like that. And more than that, I want to be my version of that.
Right.
My version of Howard. I don't want to be Howard Roark. I want to be my version of Howard Roark. And yes, I have different capabilities and different talents and different challenges because of my background, but it's even more than that. I have a very unique and personal and Robert Nasir shaped hierarchy of values. You know, common question to objectivists. If you guys are so smart, or if you're so right, if you guys are so smart, why aren't you all rich? And the easy answer is to say, well, money is just one value among many. But it's even more complicated than that. It is part of not just a hierarchy of values, but a rich complexity of values. As long as you are wealthy enough that you are not a parasite, that you're supporting yourself, that you can have the things that you want in your life. So, Catherine, thank you for that super chat. I hope you needed to hear that as well. And then a huge shout out to Wes Stewart, who's in for a big super chat. $20 says, agreed, objectivism helped me realize how much I could achieve. Thank you, Wes. A great thing for you to share there. And I hope we're all feeling some of that and keep working in that direction.
Right. See, that you said it exactly as I felt it about Howard Roark. I knew I wasn't an architect. I knew I wasn't like Howard Roark, but boy, I knew that the best parts she was starting to name the parts about me that I had not named and recognized as being the best parts about me. And so I focused on that I wanted to be more like Howard Roark. She told me that part of myself was my virtue and, foster that. And I did. I didn't become Howard Roark, but the point is that I have accomplished things in my life on my scale of achievement. And I surprised myself at what that is, because I was trying to be virtuous, and virtue is an important component of that. But you know something? Some of the greatest heroes I've ever known have been people with disabilities. Now, I'm going to say that on purpose, because heroism and moral virtue, let me be exact about this. Moral virtue does not depend upon the degree of your existential achievement. No, 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 no. It depends upon your dedication to doing the right thing, like Eddie Willer's. And some of the arcs of achievement that you see with people with severe disabilities or handicaps has been inspiring to me. It's just mind-blowing what they can do. And that inspiration to me, whatever level achievement that they do, I mean, I can see an artist who's, is physically disabled in a serious way becoming a great artist. That just blows me away. A disabled person being able simply to get by in life and find happiness and fulfillment in something is already an enormous achievement. When I see someone like that being a great artist, hats off. That guy's a hero, in my view, a real hero. And
Yes.
So it's not the scale of your achievement, my friends. Your virtue is the issue.
Yes. If anybody thinks, well, objectivists always talk about the great men, they don't appreciate people with handicaps. Look up the great objectivist artist John Woss, Jonwos.
You know who I was thinking of.
Go to cordair.com and you can look at his magnificent work. This is an incredible man born with brittle bone disease. This is somebody who faced challenge. You're born with broken bones. Every stage of your life is filled with the issues. And what he has overcome, well, fortunately, he's got videos out there where he shares his entire personal story. And just to make that point now, with that said, and super thanks to Vladimir Rusinov is in with 10, I forget BGN's Bulgarian. Well, whatever. We appreciate the super chat. Look that up later. He says, great motivational talk today. Richard Cameron is in as well and says, he's getting personal. He says, Robert, you are a great rhythm guitarist. I'm surprised that you don't have strong natural rhythm. Great job on developing. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Richard. It is my biggest hang up is my rhythm in both music and dance.
But I have to agree with Mr. Cameron there. I am more impressed with your music than you are, sir.
Thank you.
You really are great. I mean, just you make your own music as part of your own program. I just hats off.
I do love it. That's my one virtue is that I may not be great at it, but I do deeply, deeply love it. But with all of those positives, I don't want this to sound like a cheerleading session because, what's the opposite of all of this? Leonard Peikoff, let me read the last part of his answer here. Because again, we don't want it to all be, everything's good, it's all good, it's all good.
Right.
No. Because what if you get this wrong? Leonard Peikoff says, if your only goal is to be as good as someone else, be great, be the best, well, then you are completely second-handed. In the fashion of Peter Keating and the Fountainhead, you're living by others instead of by reality, by what you want, by what you're capable of and what you can actually accomplish. For many years, and this is Leonard Peikoff speaking, for many years, I may say I regarded myself as nothing but a student who didn't have a thought in his head, and then as a stenographer who was able to accurately copy down what Ayn Rand said. If I, at any one of those points, and up to today, said, well, this isn't what Hugh Axton would do, I would have been totally stalled. And I'm very happy with what I've done. And I certainly understand it's not Aristotle. Well, that's a hell of a comparison to make, to pick up objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand here, and look at that and think, but if not Aristotle. No, it's exactly right. Eleanor Roosevelt is said to have said, comparison is the thief of joy. Well, it's a lot more than that, and done improperly, it's the thief of objectivity. Leonard Peikoff is an unquestionably great man who has done great things.
Absolutely, he's a world achiever, and he never began comparing himself. And I think that there's a connection there. People who end up world achievers, I think, rarely, if ever, start out as because they couldn't do it. If you started out with a comparison, I'm compared to this person, I'm compared to that person, better, worse, if that was if you're going around in life assessing your virtue by comparing yourself to anyone, and there are people out there comparing themselves to everyone, I think that would be the formula for paralysis. I think the condition for Leonard Peikoff ending up being such a great world achiever was that he never had this comparison standard in his head. He was going to do his thing his way. That's the way all great achievers at some level do it.
Right. And we can do that properly in fiction by saying, I want to be more like Howard Roark. It doesn't have to be second-handed or pathological to say, well, I want to be the best basketball player ever. I want to be the next Michael Jordan. If it's taken in that way of saying, this is greatness and that is my goal, not to be better than that guy, but to be at his level, to be that great, not to be that guy.
Right. You can never be someone else. You're going to be to the extent you are thinking and you are using your creative mind, you are going to be a unique individual.
Yes.
Focus on that, my friends.
Yes. And in that regard, well, but aren't there some occupations that just aren't good enough? Question number 2. Leonard Peikoff is asked, I love working with children and have considered becoming a preschool teacher. But my friends and classmates say that this occupation would be disproportionate to my intelligence. Should I aim higher? And I think given what we've established so far, we can guess what Dr. Peikoff's answer to this would be. I'll just read the beginning here. There's no obligation at all for you to aim higher. Your friends are dead wrong. Well, you're not digging ditches. Any profession that involves the development and use of the intellect, the discovery and application of knowledge, is equally open to thought and creativity and all of the intellectual virtues. That is certainly true of any form of education. And then he goes on to explain education. Yeah, short of digging ditches, and there's nothing wrong with digging ditches if that's one part of a more complex job. But yes, as long as it's the full use of your mind. In fact, as soon as I read Dr. Peikoff's answer to that, I went right back to the lexicon, because Ayn Rand writes, productiveness is your acceptance of morality, your recognition of the fact that you choose to live. And then later on, she says, in the objectivist ethics, productive work does not mean the unfocused performance of the motions of some job. It means the consciously chosen pursuit of a productive career in any line of rational endeavor, great or modest, on any level of ability. It is not the degree of a man's ability, nor the scale of his work that is ethically relevant here, but the fullest and most purposeful use of his mind. Close quote, Ayn Rand.
Nearly any job has its intellectual challenges. The idea that I know you're working with small children, it's preschool, but my God, what a challenging and important task that is. Moreover, you don't have a duty to do the most challenging job you can find. She may have the brains to be a brain surgeon for all I know, or a rocket scientist for all I know. But if what she finds joy in it, and what she finds most rewarding is working with small children, education of children, she should do the thing she loves. She has no duty to exercise, this capacity of hers to the utmost, because that would be the greatest. Objectivism doesn't go by duty. Objectivism says your life and your happiness are the goal here. And what you find fulfilling is therefore what you should be doing. And now it does say, be rational. Do the best you can. Be productive in the senses you quoted. But that can be done in just about any field. It's strange to me. It actually is strange to me that objectivists these first 2 questions are actually a misunderstanding of objectivism. Ayn Rand said it over and over and over. Tom Snyder in the late 1970s, in one of her last interviews, asked her, you're so smart, you're so great, and that's why your ethics of achievement by implication applies. And she said it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered if I was the top girl in the class, which she usually was, or the slowest girl in the class. It would not matter. Objectivism applies at whatever the scale of your ability is, or whatever the scale that circumstances permit you to achieve. Virtue is independent of those factors, and that's what really counts for an objectivist. I've had friends who were construction workers and truck drivers, and some of the best people I have ever known. And they were people who put their heart, mind, and soul into it with every objectivist virtue you could see. So I could admire them, look up to them, be inspired by them. And if anyone, Ayn Rand has a great line in Atlas Shrugged. There are no lousy jobs, just lousy people.
Yes. Oh, that is a great line. Yeah. Yes. Now, I'm going to circle back to this, but let me read question number 3 real quick, because it's a real easy one, a real quick one, and maybe a little bit lighter than what we've been talking about.
Yes.
Number 3, during job interviews, I am often asked, what's your greatest weakness? It's kind of a classic. The questioner says, how should I answer this question? And Leonard Peikoff says, tell the truth, for which you'll get credit for honesty. Or evade and change the subject, which won't do you a lot. Or you could say something small or minor that will be an official answer, but won't scare them off. And then he tells the story. When I was teaching and we wrote references, there was a rule that you never just rave from beginning to end about a student, because then the recipient of the reference would say, oh, well, the teacher's prejudiced. He just likes the student. He's making it up. And then toward the end here, he gives the answer that I always give when people ask me for advice about interviews, and especially this particular question. He says, I think the best thing you can do, though, if you can get away with it, is to present virtues that the employer will love in the form of weaknesses. For instance, I just have a compulsion to go to work on time. Or I'm not that social. I can't drink a lot at Christmas parties. Or I'm so shy, I just couldn't bring myself to ask for a raise. If you can come up with one that is at all plausible, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, I don't think any of the ones Dr. Peikoff offered were particularly plausible, but I love being able to take that question and say, yes, I don't know when to stop. I work more overtime than I probably should. Sometimes it's a little bit stressful because I just can't leave a job undone.
Well, see, that's it. I remember being interviewed. Now, you went through a double interview process before you can become a public prosecutor. The FBI background check, they do the whole thing because you're joining law enforcement stuff. And the interview, they ask you the question, I have to admit that I am tenacious. I'm like a bulldog. I don't let go. And so, you're going to have to beat me off the case if you don't want me to follow this all the way through and make the most of it. And of course, they just smiled. Of course, that check, we like that because it shows tenacity and follow through and good attitude. Now, I was also honest about other things that maybe wouldn't help me get a job in law enforcement. Those little question like, and I'm going to make a big confession here, have you smoked pot? And I think to myself, oh my goodness, I'm working for law enforcement. Should I tell the truth or not? I tell the truth. And so I later asked, well, I got the job. How did answers like that get me? You got credit for the honesty. It's the ones who lie to us that are the ones who have drug problems that we don't want to hire. Yeah. And suddenly it all made sense to me. So I think his answer makes a lot of sense. Yes. And I think both strategies there, just be honest and get credit for the honesty, but also, sometimes our virtues, those virtues that sometimes we can get monominded, maybe defense values, as psychologists call them, can have both a virtuous aspect and a, sometimes negative or obsessive quality aspect to them. Present it just like that, as I did. And I really think that's the best advice. And this comes back to understanding us as heroes. A hero is not a person who is, down the list, perfect, going to meet the checklist of everything that they're looking for. They know everyone isn't this model, whatever it is they're looking for, the model tax accountant, the model DA, the model whatever. What they're looking for is that kind of virtue, honesty, self-awareness, awareness of what the job requires. If you get that across, you've made your point, because it's almost as though they recognize virtue is what counts, and that achievement exists along a scale. We can't expect everything from everybody. No, we cannot. What we do want is honesty. What we do want is an appreciation of the job ahead.
Yes. But don't ever say, can I be honest with you? The worst expression in the world. Because, of course, that implies everything you said before wasn't true.
Don't trust anything else I say. Well, I'm not always honest those times. When I signal it, that's insane.
So if productiveness is the fullest use of your mind,
Right,
is there a limit to what kind of careers could be productive? Question number 4.
right.
What is the moral status of housewives or stay-at-home moms? Leonard Peikoff was asked this question, and he says, objectivism doesn't care where you stay or where you do your activities. It's what it is that you do. Now, Leonard Peikoff wrote this in June of 2012, well before COVID, when working from home, it was greatly expanded, and happily, some of those positions that made sense to allow remote work have stayed that way. So that is a good thing. Leonard Peikoff says, if your activity at home or anywhere else adds up to nothing, it's random. You go to a movie, you go to a party, you have a romance and this and that. Well, you could do that at work too, and the same estimate applies. It's not rational, it's not purposeful. That is not to say, however, that a mother has to be like that. Motherhood, as Ayn Rand has said many times, is a real full-time job if done properly. That includes all sorts of aspects, including educating the child, overseeing his development, guiding him through all the problems that he will have, everything from his first disagreement with a child he doesn't understand to what to wear at the prom. This is the same status as a woman pursuing a career. The only difference is that after the child grows up, if the mother is still young enough, she should go out and have her own independent career. And then he wraps up. If you say it about a housewife who stays at home and has no children, well, I want to know why she stays at home. Is there a project she's pursuing at home? She's painting or writing, well, that's fine. But if she's just staying at home, dusting the furniture and watching soap operas, well, that's in the same category as doing nothing at work. And that seems pretty straightforward.
Ayn Rand
sometimes
as
yes.
one of the most important jobs. And if you think about it for just 5 minutes, to do it right is one of the most demanding, challenging, and potentially rewarding jobs out there. To me, parenthood is so vital, so important, and so complex a topic that talk about everyday heroes. People who do it right, people who do the parenthood thing and do it rationally, approach it like a career, these people are heroes. These people are heroes like people who do, 9-to-5 jobs out there, which are never 9-to-5 if you're doing it right. People who are productive and hardworking and creative out there I can't see the distinction. Just because you're not getting a paycheck, just because you're working at home, does not devalue this challenging, rewarding, and important work that you're doing. It is not, the way other people look at it. It's not how society has traditionally looked at it, much less. That's a kind of comparison, isn't it? We rob ourselves by comparison. We're not going to say, well, you're just like any other mother who just, goes out there and does it randomly and is an emotionalist about it and will be irresponsible with their children's education and health. No. We're talking about people who do it right. And that requires purposeful, rational thought. It requires consistency. It's a challenging job. I think of my sister. Prior to having children, she has 5 children. She now has grandchildren. I could remember when she was a little girl, that's what she wanted to be, is a mother. But to do that, she prepared herself by studying at college, child development, child psychology. She worked as a nurse. She worked as a nurse with young people and children. She worked with handicapped children, all before she took on the task of being a mother and a grandmother as a full-time job, because she wanted the skill set to approach it rationally like a career, which she did. And she's found that to be enormously rewarding. She has my nieces, nephews, and grandnieces and nephews are wonderful kids. She did it right. And so all I can say to that sort of thing, is that's approaching it like a career in a rational way. And if you want to make motherhood your career, how is that any less heroic than any other job we might do if we do it well, if we take it seriously, if we are rational and consistent? Then how is that any less virtuous than someone who does some other job that gets a paycheck at some office or factory doing their job well? I don't get it.
Yeah. And in relation to this question and the previous one about, well, I love working with children, I want to work with teach children. If you wonder what, we talked about how in any field you could take it much higher than you may realize. If you wonder what that looks like, if you're not already following Matt Bateman and Gina Gorlin on Twitter, you have got to be following those folks. Matt Bateman, I joke that he's now Matt GPT because people go to him for answers before they look on Google or Chat GPT.
He's
got to follow these guys.
Oh yeah, the parenting stuff. Oh my God, talk about valuable insights. My God,
Yeah.
and appreciation for the role of parents. Yeah.
And what Higher Ground and Matt Bateman are doing to Montessori, it's just it's amazing. And it just goes to show that maybe you'll go be a teacher at a preschool, and depending on your level of talent and ability and interest and passion, you might end up starting a school, or you might end up writing a book, or you might end up doing something, or you may just help teach some of the best kids out there. There's almost no limit to what could happen in that job where the questioner says, I'm not sure that's a proper use of my intellectual abilities. Well, to hell with what your friends think. There's no doubt you could take that just as far as you want to take it. Now,
Right.
We have a super chat with a question. And this is an interesting one to me. Sense of Mind is in for $5. Thank you for that. Thank you for supporting the ARCUK. And says, my apologies if this is off topic. Oh, there we go. Say one wants to do a grad degree in a hard science. Should the woke/leftist culture of higher education deter one? Now, I'm going to guess I might know your answer to this, but I've got to say, and I'll mention it again at the end of the show, coming up on the Daily Objective today at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. UK time, 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, 10 out there on the left coast, Nikos Sotirakopoulos is going to be speaking to Ben Baer on the topic, studying humanities at the university, is it worth it? Now, Leonard Peikoff has answered questions like this before, and 10, 20, 30 years ago at the Fort Hall Forum. And should I even go into philosophy anymore now that it's so corrupt? It's such a lousy field. Well, Sense of Mind is asking about a hard science degree, which I would think would be similarly under assault by the woke/left, but less so than the humanities. So, James, I want to know what you think of this, but definitely also Sense of Mind. Watch the Daily Objective today for more insights on that.
It is
James,
true.
what do you think?
Well, first, I have to acknowledge the truth. The more the government interferes with any given field, the more challenges there will be, and injustices to those challenges there will be. You'll have to overcome stuff you probably should never have to overcome. And it is true that even the hard sciences have to some extent been corrupted by the corruption of our culture and philosophy, coming from philosophy. But I know theoretical physicists who are smart and rational and can be steadily employed. So I think there is still something much, you can get in engineering degrees and medical degrees and all kinds of other technical degrees where I think it's largely still virtuous and reality oriented. In the humanities, trust me, my friend, in the humanities, it makes the hard sciences look like a cakewalk. And yet I would still say you can be rational, virtuous. In fact, it's important. It's really, since that is such a horrible state of affairs today, the humanities in academia, it becomes all the more important, starting with philosophy, that we get good people in there. Now, does that mean that you're going to face more challenges, more hurdles? Yeah, but in a sense, that makes it more rewarding. You're doing something very important. You're focused on the area where the corruption is coming from and that needs most help. So I wouldn't even say don't be a philosopher or an economist or a historian if that's what makes you happy. If that's what you find fulfilling, if that's what's right for your context, go for that. Go for that. Now, if the job does require you to, you say some government regulate, you have to join some labor organization or association, or so you have to join a government agency at worst, even to do the thing, and they impose requirements that make it impossible for you to be virtuous in that job, then I don't think I could do the job. But so long as you're short of that, I would take on the challenge of our current culture. I would take on the challenge of some government regulation and corruption to do the thing you love to do. And in those cases, as I say, it's all the more important and potentially all the more challenging and rewarding in doing those jobs. That would be my answer.
Actually, I have to agree. And it's been a motivation for me in circumstances where I'm facing opposition like that, that I will not let them stop me. If you want it bad enough, if it is your passion, then let your anger at the opposition fuel you with that thought in mind, that I will not let them stop me. I will not let them matter that much.
I love that. Don't let them stop you. Robert says it so well, so often. Don't let them stop you.
Yes.
Right.
And we've got another super chat here, and this is a challenging one, but it's one that I really want to read and get your thoughts on it. I have some thoughts on this too. Catherine is in with $4.99. Thank you for that. Thank you for supporting the work we do. And says, well, what if you're disabled and can't work, and you spend your time taking care of your health and educating your mind? And I've got to say, I know a couple of folks for whom that, including in the objectivist community, for whom that description fits.
Yes.
And without getting too much into it, it's a similar answer to the question about scholarships and other government programs, which Ayn Rand actually answered in an essay answering the question on the subject of scholarships. And also, it comes up over and over again. It came up most recently when the Ayn Rand Institute chose to take a PPP loan, which is basically being forced on everybody, right, with the idea that it makes no sense to say, our money's being taken from us, these programs are being imposed on us, and the one group of people who are not going to take advantage isn't even the right word, the one group of people who are going to allow themselves to be penalized will be the people who stand up against it, will be the people who are fighting it. And Ayn Rand reached what appears to be ironical conclusion of, no, the only people that deserve to receive, for example, money back from Social Security are the ones who are fighting it.
Right. She said, take Social Security, take the student loan, take the scholarship. If you oppose the government force, if you oppose the government program, you're the one who actually deserves it. And wait a minute here. What kind of a threat is it? From our socialist or welfare statist friends, agree with us or starve? No.
Yeah, no, we should have all that money taken from us, but we should be the ones who are penalized by not receiving any of it back.
Or be hypocrites. The Atlas Society came out and attacked the Ayn Rand Institute for doing so, dropping, of course, Ayn Rand's whole context. Shows you the connection, the tenuous connection that they often have with objectivism itself. But I have to ultimately and fully agree with you. Now, the wider question about people with disabilities, objectivism is not a philosophy for people who do lack some fundamental capacity, right? In the sense that it's virtue for the ordinary case. It's virtue in 99% of the cases. When we have someone with an extreme developmental disability or someone with an extreme physical disability, I would say that the heroism scale has changed. You see, if they can achieve just a normal life, think of the heroic achievement, think of the virtue, think of the thought, rationality, consistency that they have to put, the effort that they have to put into just achieving a normal life. In their context, that is absolutely moral heroism. Now, objectivist ethics is trying to take into account the normal healthy case. That should be our standard focus. And so it is not an insult to the extremely disabled to say that objectivism is about people who do have a normal range of capacities. But is it inapplicable? No. It just applies in a very specialized way to the extremely disabled, in my view. Objectivism is developed for 99.9% of us out there who do have some capacities. The worse the disability is, to the point that if it really does make it impossible for you to engage in rational thought, and you need some guardian to be appointed over you so that even all the simple decisions in your life are made by somebody else, then no, objectivism really doesn't apply to you. You're not a volitional conceptual agent in that same sense that the rest of us are. And in that sense, it's not really objectivist ethics, but something else, a category of objectivist ethics that can apply, but not what objectivism was written for. Objectivism was written for, it's like the ethics of emergency situation. Objectivist ethics is not for that last 5 minutes when you see the atomic bomb dropping and the mushroom cloud going off. No, objectivist ethics is designed for ordinary people. And that's another thing on this topic generally that I want to get back to. Ayn Rand was a romantic realist. Her heroes are not Superman from another planet who's virtually invincible and whom the law of cause and effect barely applies to. Ayn Rand was talking about ordinary people, in effect, even her great achievers, not just the Eddie Willers, but the whole range of heroes that she projects. And I'm going to call them all heroes, including Eddie Willers. The whole range of heroes that she projects, showing you that, look, this encompasses normal human life. These are people who have jobs. These are people who get married and divorced. These are people who have relations. They're people like you and me. She's not talking about fantasy figures from some comic book. No, objectivist ethics applies to us human beings who do have a rational capacity. I'll put it that simply.
One of the most inspiring phrases I've ever heard, never said, is the 5-word phrase, "I did the best I could." It always gets me a little choked up. If you know that you're doing the best that you can, and you find yourself in a situation where, because of an ailment, because of a handicap, because of a psychological challenge, whatever it is, that you are doing your honest best, and you're in a part of your life, for some of the folks I know, it's not going to be permanent. It's just there's hard limits on what they can do. As you say, there's not an intrinsic scale on which your virtue should be, or your productive output should be measured. Question is, are you using what you've got to provide for yourself and do the best you can? And for some people, they're not going to be able to provide all of their own sustenance.
Right.
And for folks like that, the biggest question I always have is, well, do you understand that? Do you appreciate that? Are you grateful for what you're being provided, or are you coming in saying, I deserve it because I'm disabled? That decides it. Context decides everything. And so, yes, I know people in that situation. Some of them are fighting to get through it. A couple of them will never quite get to the point where they are a net producer in society, but that's almost irrelevant in that kind of case.
No, I had a serious health issue myself. I mean, serious health issue where I was being hospitalized on a almost regular basis. I couldn't continue my job as a trial lawyer. The thing I loved doing, I loved going to work every day. I was excited going to work. I loved that work. And it's what I'd wanted to do. And when the doctors tell you, you just can't do that work anymore, it is a rough blow. You've got to readjust your life. You've got to find a new central purpose. You've got to move your life around. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not so difficult. But circumstances also play a critical role here. Don't blame yourself for circumstances you find yourself in either. It's rough. Boy, it was rough for me, I have to say.
Yeah.
However rough it is, the question is, are you doing what you can? Are you doing the best you can in your context?
Right.
That's really the critical question, not a matter of existential achievement or even being able to do what you might most want to do. That's not the test.
Right. Right. Yeah. Catherine's back in the super chat. She just clarified, I'm physically disabled, not cognitively disabled. And I assume that was the case for you, Catherine. I was kind of speaking more, using your question to speak more broadly, but I do appreciate the super chat and the clarification there. Now, on the other end of the scale, of course, you've got people who are just physical specimens, as Bernstein likes to say. Yeah, people like me, obviously. And that gets us to question number 5, the last question here. Is a career as a swimsuit model intellectually demanding? And if not, is it immoral? Well, I'm glad somebody asked before I did. And Leonard Peikoff answers. I love ending with a fun question like this.
I just have to stop right here.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's self-evident that being a swimsuit model is an important and valuable function in our society.
It is.
I just want to put that thought out there first.
Without that, where would we be?
Where would we be?
Without that annual Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. I don't want to live in a world like that.
Right, without that.
And Leonard Peikoff answers, I think any career can be intellectually demanding if you are prepared to enlarge its dimensions and your involvement in it as much as possible. If you're a model, you might want to study photography and figure out better ways of shooting the models. If it's a swimsuit, you might go into design just as a part-time thing. You might think of ways to improve, more beautiful, more support, more athletic ability. You might want to check out the competition. What's going on with other model agencies? Do they do anything better? You may, in this process, get so much knowledge that you start to think, well, you could put out a line yourself that's better long range. You don't have to do all of this, but the whole idea is that if you keep searching and looking into the aspects of a career, you can make anyone intellectually demanding and reap the rewards. Of course, if you just slouch over, put your chest out, smile, and then say, okay, let's go to bed. Well, that's not intellectually demanding. I don't think it's too moral either. Leonard Peikoff always has a funny way of wrapping up these answers lightly. But yes, I
think back on the great models of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Many of them became actresses too, and of course that is there's a whole complex art to acting. But just qua model, just as models, take Joan Crawford or Greta Garbo and those amazing photos from the 1930s. These women thought about it. They knew about lighting and makeup and angles and how to present yourself and drama and the expression and I have myself known and been friendly with one of my very best, oldest friends in the world was for years married to a model who appeared on Paris Vogue. She was the great photographer Herb Ritz's main muse. If you get one of his books, she's in there a lot. Her image is places where you've probably seen it before. She was, in effect, a professional model with great success. But again, she approached it in precisely that way. What she wore, the shadows on her face, the angles on her face, the angle of the camera. She was absolutely aware of all of that. And when she would go to a shoot, she would actually work. I mean, most of the work, she said, happened before the pictures were ever taken in this planning discussion between herself and the photographer. No, what do you mean to do? What is your purpose? What are we selling a certain product here? What do you want from me in terms of what's the you know what I mean? She would go through almost like it was an acting job. And she would, every little element from the lighting to the makeup to the way she presented herself was thought about to create the most effective picture for the context. Being a model, see, any job, and this is what, circling back on what Leonard Peikoff said about motherhood or being a preschool teacher, any job, really, it's hard for me to even imagine a job, I guess I could go way down and find, but those are probably going to be fulfilled by people who maybe don't have the highest natural talents, and that would be challenging and rewarding for. But just about any job out there has got intellectual dimensions, has got challenges to it that make it a real career, that make it a real job. I couldn't be a fashion model, and it's not just because of my physique. It's because I don't approach things that way, nor do I find it rewarding to approach things that way. That's not what I find, I love the product though, as I was saying. Like you say, the swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated is one of the great moments of my year. But while I can appreciate the work of someone like that, that's real achievement there too. Even to have that idea for the photograph and to pull it off like that. The photograph was an achievement, not one I'd be interested in helping to make, but I can still appreciate the results for sure. As with any of these other tasks, I can sure appreciate the brain surgeon. That's obviously Ayn Rand would say he's a hero, right? But no, Ayn Rand would also say that the fashion model can be a heroine too.
Yeah, no, she was a great admirer of Farrah Fawcett, who was certainly a model before she was an actress. And
that poster, for those of us who were teenage boys in the 1970s, that poster is engraved in our memories for all time. No, she was
iconic. You don't even need to explain further.
Right. She was one of the great models of the 20th century, truly.
So we've really talked about the whole range from the truck driver in Atlas Shrugged to Eddie Willers to John Galt, and then back to real life at all levels of ability and capabilities. Because again, we talked about how whatever reality dictates, whatever your limitations are, that's the scope within which you operate. We had the pleasure of answering that question from Catherine, who I know from online interactions, you have no reason to doubt your own virtue just because you are facing challenges that keep you from being as productive as you might like to be. No, please don't second guess that.
Quite the opposite. My admiration for you, Catherine, that you're thinking even about these things with a physical disability. The fact that you're able to do something like that, you're more heroic in my mind, not less. Those of us who have easier time physically don't face that challenge. Your ability to face and deal with that challenge is heroic. Do not sell yourself short on that. That is an objectivist virtue right there.
Excellent. So big thanks. We had a great day in the super chat here between Catherine and Wes and Vladimir and Richard and Sense of Mind. Very kind things said to us on the show, and we appreciate that. I knew this was, James, I knew this was going to be a good discussion today. Because you gave us some great questions to jump off from. We are working with questions from the book, Keeping It Real by Leonard Peikoff. Now, before I wrap up, I've got to say, as I mentioned today, the Daily Objective, Nikos Satirikopoulos and Ben Bayer speaking on the subject, studying humanities at the university. Is it worth it? I definitely think Sense of Mind, you're asking about higher education and the impact of woke and the left. That is going to be an episode worth hearing in just under an hour from now. And then, as if that isn't enough, outstanding ARCUK content at 10 p.m. UK time. That's 5 o'clock here on the East Coast, 2 o'clock out there on the left coast. Creatical thought experiments. Wait, what did he say? Yes, creatical. Well, this is Lee Pearson has a show called The Cutting Edge. So, of course, he's speaking from the cutting edge, and he's making a combination, obviously, of creative and critical thinking. Creatical thought experiments, challenging assumptions that make bad critical thinking and break good creative thinking. Well, that's going to be a good show, too.
You want to expand your mind? Check out Lee Pearson. He will get you thinking. He will get your brain cells humming. If you want to expand your mind, listen to Lee Pearson.
This is a guy.
What a great day we have at the Ayn Rand Center UK. And I want to thank everyone for their support today. It really was a good day in the super chats. Thank you.
The super chats were very generous and very much appreciated. The only thing left to say is if you're not a member yet, the link is right at the top of the chat to go to AynRandCenter.co.uk. Click Become a Member. You can be in there's 4 different membership levels. The lowest one, I shouldn't say the lowest, the smallest amount, £9.99 a month, gets you access to all of the extras. There are YouTube feeds that are only for members. That's membership on the YouTube channel. There are study groups. Well, James, you know more about the study groups than I do because you offer several of them every weekend. Studies on Ayn Rand's ideas.
This Sunday, This Sunday, we have an open question and answer period where you can bring your questions about objectivism, submit them if you can. So if you subscribe this week, you'll be able to participate in our Sunday seminar and bring your toughest questions about objectivism to the discussion. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of them. I'll give it my best shot. I'm not a Leonard Peikoff or an Ayn Rand, but I'll give my best shot at it. But at least we'll have a discussion and some really smart students of objectivism there in those discussions. So subscribe, bring your questions, and we'll talk objectivism this Sunday.
Well, James, your modesty does you honor. As Clint Eastwood says, a man's got to know his limitations. But you have been leading the discussion of Leonard Peikoff's Objectivism, the State of the Art. So I know if anybody has any questions this Sunday, you're going to be able to take them on. I have every faith in you in that regard. And in this context, of course, by faith, I mean reason to believe. We also have the Ayn Rand Fiction Club on Tuesday afternoons. I guess that's Tuesday evenings in the UK. So all sorts of good reasons to become a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK. And James, thank you. Thank you for an outstanding discussion. And I am looking forward to doing it all over again with new and delicious goodness next Wednesday, folks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.